Okay.
Hey there.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Gary. Looks like we have a quorum. I don't see Ken yet. So I think we should give him a minute. I'm going to just text him and see if he's around. Jason, is that you with the 237 number?
This is Jason. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, good. I just wanted to make sure that was you.
Yep, that's me.
Okay, thank you. So I think we'll just give Ken another minute or two and then we can get started. Janet or Gary or Nick, you guys can fight over who can be chair in the absence of Ken.
I think Janet makes a great chair.
Oh, thank you, Gary. Okay.
And I think what I'll try and do is see if I can pull up revised plan for Jason so we can all be looking at the same thing.
Hillary, I don't know if I told you already. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
The water board did agree to waive all the water charges for the infiltration test at the transfer station.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Great.
so it doesn't matter where we get water from.
Perfect.
Yep.
Well, it's 3:05 and I don't see Ken. Do we want to get started without him? We do have a quorum.
Okay, let's get started then, okay? Okay, this is a Wellfleet Board of Health meeting for September 9th, 2020. And we have a quorum, so let's proceed. The first variance, Jason, at 257 Main Street, Wellfleet, Judith and Edward Goldman.
Hi, for the record, this is Jason Ellis representing the Goldmans. I actually have revised the plan. I sent that over to Hillary. I'm not sure if you guys have gotten it yet.
Sorry, Jason, you can't see the screen, but I have it up on the screen, so we're
Okay.
all...
Perfect.
Yeah, I have the revised plan also.
Okay, perfect. So basically what's happened since I started the design, the property for parcel 46, which is the Historical Society building that was just redone, they have since installed town water, and that well that's there is in the process of being abandoned for potable use. So what that does is it allows more of the driveway area to be outside of the 100-foot from any wells. So what I was able to do was to redesign the system with a leach field that would be all entirely in that driveway area and utilize the existing septic tank that exists there now. And this it would eliminate them having to put IA in for this house. It just saves them that's probably about $20,000 or $30,000 by being able to do this. So what we're looking for is we're looking for a 15-foot variance from the proposed leach field to the foundation wall, which would be the dwelling. We're looking for a 2-foot variance from the leach area to the slab, which is the garage to the south. And we're looking for a 25% reduction in the size of the leach field from the required size. This also requires a 5-foot overdig around the system, but because it's a leach field, you can't use the sidewall on the side of the leach field. So having a 5-foot overdig on the sides is kind of irrelevant. So what I've done is made it down to a 1-foot overdig around the leach field just to give it some good soil immediately around the gravel. And that just, it's a very old building. The foundation's kind of old. So we're just trying to minimize any disturbance to the foundation that's there. And then also to keep it a gravity fed system, we're looking to put the leach field 4.5 feet below grade. The required distance is 3 feet maximum cover over the system. So the system's vented, so because it's under the driveway already, so the venting should alleviate any issues due to the excessive cover of the system. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you.
I have a question, Janet, here. So the change in the plan then, Jason, is based on the well location, not based on the location of the property? I mean, I'm trying to figure out exactly what the Wellfleet Harbor embayment watershed, where that area cuts off, for Duck Creek.
Yeah, the system itself is, you have a bylaw that says that any leach field that is proposed within 100 feet of a well has to have
Right.
IA.
I know that.
Yep. As far as the embayment goes,
maybe I'm jumping the gun, but we're going to be discussing some new articles of implementation that require anything that's new, repaired, or upgrade to have an AI system if it's in the Wellfleet Harbor embayment system area.
Okay.
So I just didn't know about the location. Maybe Kurt can answer that.
Yeah,
Or Hillary
it's in that watershed for sure.
It's in that watershed.
Yep.
Okay, so if it's in that watershed and we're going to approve these variances now for a non-AI system, any other comments or questions? Or am I alone here? Hillary?
I don't have any comments or questions other than the fact that if there is no variance to the well, we do not have a regulation requiring the IA because it's not
Right now, okay.
correct.
The other thing I wanted to say too that I forgot to say was that this property is currently served by a well, and they're going to be abandoning the well that serves this property and putting in town water. So that's a plus there. So.
Yes, yeah, I'm not worried about this property's water, but I'm worried about.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I guess if nobody has any other questions.
Did we lose Gary or is he still here? Oh no, there's Gary.
There you go. Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Just a question because I don't see it. Is there a surveyor's stamp on here?
There is no surveyor stamp on this.
Are we within within 5 feet of is that Masonic Place a road line there?
The Masonic Lane's actually a right-of-way on the property for this. So the lot line's actually on the west side of Masonic Lane.
Oh, okay. All right.
So we're like 12 feet off that lot line. So.
Yeah. I didn't get that. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Hillary, can you hear me? This is Nick.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I just wanted to ask Jason a question about the size of the leach field. Variance number 3, because he mentions that, 744 feet are required. So he takes 25%, it gets down to 526. And then he provides 415. Is that adequate?
Well, that's the square footage. So the square footage that's required is 744. I'm providing 561. And then when you apply the 0.74 loading coefficient on that, it brings you down to 415.414. So as a 5-bedroom system, this would be required to have 550
Right.
after you apply the loading coefficient to it.
Oh, okay.
So
Loading coefficient got me. Okay,
yeah, no worries.
just curious about that.
So.
But I guess, Janet, we may be in a catch-22 here since those.
It's a timing thing, Nick. It's a timing.
We should have done, if we wanted, we should have dealt with that first.
Yes.
I understand. I agree totally with you, though, and with Kurt also, that we have to, well, we'll get to that, I guess. All right. Thank you for the update on the leach
Well,
field.
the thing is, we approve the variances and go ahead, Nick, then we've done the okay. So this is 1A I lost.
Correct.
Okay, so good. Did anybody want to make a motion?
I have a motion maker if you're interested.
Go ahead.
Okay, I move to approve the J.C. Ellis plan, dated July 16th, revised September 8th, 2020, and grant the 6 variances for the upgrade of a septic system to serve a 5-bedroom structure, a grandfathered non-conforming dwelling with respect to nitrogen loading. Design flow to be limited to 550 gallons per day to serve 5 bedrooms. A reduced leach area variance of 25% reduction with 415.14 gallons per day. No increased habitable area or conversion of use without Board of Health review. Connection to the municipal water system and deed recording.
I'll second.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I can't make the motion, so one of you have to make the motion.
I'll
Gary?
make the motion.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Nick.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jason, very much. Okay, are there any other variances that came in late? Hillary, I don't see anything else here.
Yep.
Nope, just that.
Okay. Okay, so on to new business. The wastewater committee is with us today with a discussion on proposed regulation requiring IA technology. I don't know, Scott, Kurt, Hillary?
I mean, I can at least lead in, I suppose. That was a great example.
Oh, exactly.
It was exactly right.
Timing was off.
But it is what it is, right? Scott and I were just talking about, these lost opportunities and the, kind of the importance of probably jumping on, this regulatory change. I think everybody's had a chance to read it. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory. One of the things I think that will be a challenge, or that I'd certainly like to see, is, as part of the wastewater plan, that we find funding for the incremental cost of these improvements. So at least people are, it'll be more palatable. We'll get more systems installed. We can really, once we get to a certain number of systems, ultimately the DEP can put make these general use so that we don't have sort of some of the, onerous, I would say, reporting burdens that come with a prototype type of a system. But, I think these have such a great track record. I mean, Scott can talk more about that, in terms of what's happened around the world. So this isn't new it's not new in that sense, but anyway, that's just sort of an opening. Scott, I don't know where you want to take it from there.
Sure. Well, thank you. For the record, my name's Scott Horsley. I'm serving as a consultant to the town, working with Kurt and Hillary to prepare a targeted watershed plan. And as I suspect most of you know, there's the basis for this is the Massachusetts Estuaries Project report and the identification of excessive nitrogen loading in many of the town's watershed. And it wasn't interesting to hear that last variance, because Duck Creek is the most challenged watershed in the town. And The regulation, the other thing I have to say is, as part of our work, one of the biggest challenges facing the town, I think, is future growth. We've been looking at existing nitrogen loads as of the time that the MEP report was published, which is just a few years ago when the work was done. And there's a significant amount of growth, as I think you know, that can occur in these watersheds, not only new properties, but expansions of existing properties. And according to the MEP numbers, that's substantial. And essentially we'll get the town in deeper, is the way I put it, in terms of a situation to mitigate. It's going to cost a lot more to fix later. So the intent here of this regulation is really twofold. One is to get a regulation in place such that new development comes along or upgrades provide the opportunity for the town to require and install what I'll call best available technology, which was an EPA term they came out with a number of years ago. And the good news is we have some very good recent upgrades of these INA, innovative and alternative septic systems. And I should mention as background, I worked as a consultant to the Cape Cod Commission on the 208 plan. And we classified IA systems really in two groups. One is just the standard nitrogen IAs, and most of them are rated at 19 milligrams per liter as an effluent concentration, which doesn't differ all that much from what MEP says comes out of a Title V system, which is around 23 or 24 milligrams per liter. So it's an incremental benefit, but not, a lot. So there's a number of new systems that you've probably heard about. One is George Hoyfelder's own design, the so-called layer cake, which is out there and is producing, I think on average, 5 or 6 milligrams per liter. And then there's two commercial systems that have been approved by Mass DEP with provisional status, and that's the Nitrix system and the Nitro systems, both of which are achieving numbers in that same range, below 10 milligrams per liter. The Nitro system just gained provisional status with DEP and was the first one to get a upper limit rating of 11 milligrams per liter rather than the rest of them that are at 19. So following EPA's sort of concept related to the Clean Water Act that we ought to be installing best available technology, the overall intent of the regulations is try to get new development with these systems to minimize the increases in the future. And then secondly, and probably as importantly, to think about trying to replace existing systems with these better technologies as can be done most cost efficiently. And I've talked with Hillary and she provided me some great data. And she gave me 5 years of data going back on repairs, upgrades to systems. And it struck me that when somebody's digging up a site to, as we just saw, to replace maybe or add a leach field, that's a good time to go in and add another concrete tank with wood chips in it, if I can be that general. It's really, both the Nitrix and Nitro systems are wood chip bioreactor based systems, and they really are a concrete chamber about the size of a septic tank, a little bit larger, with wood chips, etc. So it struck me that the regulation also should seek to address upgrades and repairs, because again, that would be a cost-effective time to go in and make the change. Now, I'll mention when I first drafted this regulation, I wrote it as requiring these so-called enhanced INAs. And by enhanced, I mean the newer generation that I was referring to, the Nitro and Nitrix. But we talked about it and we thought that since they are new and they're a little more expensive, maybe there's sort of a two-step process as I've laid it out here. And I have the regulation in front of me. I don't know if you do, but I drafted it as kind of oh, there it is. I see it. Thank you.
Yeah.
As 2 paragraphs, 608, which would, and I use your nomenclature of your regulation, would be a relatively simple requirement to at least require what I'd call kind of a conventional INA at 19 milligrams. But then 609 would provide an incentive to homeowners to upgrade to the enhanced INA, which would be, I really would cut the nitrogen load probably in half or more based upon some of the monitoring data. And we also discussed the possibility of the town providing an economic incentive here. And I should mention that there's been some recent work done down in Falmouth, part of the Buzzards Bay Coalition, and this kind of tracks something they've been doing down there, providing incentive grants to homeowners who are willing to put these systems in. And that's been working quite well. They just published that report. And so that's really what this is based upon. And I should mention that as part of my work in developing this townwide watershed plan, we're looking at a whole range of nitrogen reducing options, including more shellfish and aquaculture, something called the permeable reactive barrier, which we're looking at down on Commercial Street that might intercept some of the groundwater and treat it. We're looking at the Mayo Creek and the Herring River restorations and develop some nitrogen credits from those projects, as well as other mechanisms or other technologies. We could talk about the 95 Lawrence project if we want to later, but that's a whole nother can of worms, but that's certainly a good example of another project that could provide technology to reduce some nitrogen as well. And the INA, this discussion of these enhanced INAs really are an integral part of the overall plan. I would say that without something like this, it's going to be really hard for the town to meet these thresholds without building really an extensive, almost town-wide sewer system, which is, of course, the more conventional backup. But these enhanced INAs do appear to be working very well. The Nitro system has an installation over at George Hoyfelder's test facility at the military base, and has been developing some very, very good data, and it does have the DEP approval. So maybe I'll stop there. Hillary, I don't know if you want to add anything to this before we open it up, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but I would just close by saying that this would be a very good step for the town to take, in my opinion, towards making a commitment to address this nitrogen issue, which is a serious issue. I think you all know that. Without something like this, as somebody preparing this plan, I'm going to have a hard time preparing a plan that meets the targets, NEP targets. So I'll stop there. And again, Hillary, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't have anything particularly to add to that. I'm just thinking about the areas surrounding our freshwater ponds as well, because we know that those are in peril too. And there really aren't any good phosphorus removing systems out there. I know George at one time tinkered with his layer cake, or they did down in Florida or somewhere, to look at phosphorus removal. Do you have any information off the top of your head on if there is a way to sort of tweak the layer cake system for phosphorus? I feel like he added something else to the mix to do that, but I'm drawing a blank here.
Yeah, no, that's right, Hillary. There have been a number of research projects, and essentially, instead of using the wood chips as a food source for the bacteria that basically process the nitrogen, what they're doing with phosphorus is using metals like iron, in some cases aluminum or alum, which is used to treat phosphorus in ponds directly. But there are some commercial systems. In fact, the Nitrix system has a close cousin that's owned by the same company called Phosrid, PHOSRID, which is a technology that they have installed. I don't think it's been approved. In fact, I don't think there's any systems that DEP has approved for phosphorus removal yet. But there are some systems out there, and I think you're right. I think George did do some R&D on this, and I believe he was looking at using iron filings or metal to add to the matrix. I guess I would suggest that that is certainly a valid concern and something that maybe the Board of Health could look at, but perhaps separately from this regulation, because I think, as you've already indicated, I think it is a different technology that would be required in those areas.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't want to jumble things up. But
No, not at all. Not at all.
I just,
I have a question.
Okay.
Hillary.
Janet, go ahead.
Okay. Just taking the practical application of this the variances that we approved today for this home sale that has required an upgrade. The concern, and we are a strong board, and when we have our regulations and our statutes behind us, we can implement them to the welfare of the entire community. I think the thing that I feel about this, and I think about this, is that if in fact the Duck Creek area is eventually going to need even a partial sewerage, again, if this regulation was in place this morning, these people would spend $30,000 to $35,000 instead of 15. Okay, and then if sewers come in, this could be the buyer, this could be the seller. I don't know who's paying for it, but or any upgrade. Who, you know, so that's the thing that I think has to be addressed, is the reasonability of this being something to meet making the plan, as opposed to something to do in order to see a future of growth in the downtown area. I mean, we can't have a downtown area filled with art galleries. At some point, people have to stop and eat something in a restaurant that has to have a system that can manage the group of people that we bring into Wellfleet. So I think we need to, I think we would be remiss if we didn't have the foresight to look into and be able to articulate, as Board of Health members that are on the front line making this happen, some type of a reasonable plan for the town. So I'm looking for a more futuristic view here.
Yeah, well, I think
Making
that
the plan.
what you're describing is our watershed permit, right? So,
Mhm.
so we, in our permit, or before we even get to our permit, we have all of our options. All of our options get laid out. So we have the option of IA systems. We have the option of sewering. We have the option of oysters. We have the option of PRBs. We have all these things sort of in our toolbox. And then we begin to look at, okay, so if we put our IA systems here, we get this amount of nitrogen reduction in this watershed, which
I
is,
understand all that. Yes, yes.
then it goes out to the town to select which plan or method they want to choose to go with. So I think what you're hitting at is, we don't want to hit people in their pocketbooks twice.
Right.
Telling them, okay, today you hook up to this IA, this is great, you're going to give us a lot of data, you're going to reduce nitrogen. Then in 5 years we come back and say, ooh, sorry, we were wrong. Now we need you to hook up to the sewer. So I think my thought process would be, while you can make this effective today or in a week or a month or a year, it would be better to make the regulation effective, you know, upon approval of our watershed permit. So once we have our watershed permit, we know exactly what we're doing for the next, you know, 15 to 20 years.
I'd like that, Hillary.
And it's unfortunate because we are going to miss them, but the fact is we've missed a lot along the way anyway. So, I mean, I think the Board of Health does feel a sense of urgency to get moving. I think the wastewater committee feels that sense of urgency as well. You know, and you can enact a regulation today, or, you know, you could wait, because I remember, I don't know who it was that really drove that fact home with us, you know, sometime within the past 2 years, that you really don't want to make people pay for something twice.
Yeah. And yes, right. And will the 208 plan include the potential of sewering?
Yeah, so let me, maybe a couple responses. First of all, I am, as I said, this is part of, as Hillary mentioned, part of an overall plan that is in development. In fact, I have a draft plan for the Duck Creek watershed, which includes, as one example, a treatment system at this 95 Lawrence project, the PRB, and then a certain number of these enhanced INAs in the watershed, and it does solve the threshold issue. It does meet the MEP with those actions in place. So this is a method to get there, and you're right. Another method is to sewer, do a townwide sewer collection system. Presumptively, the presumption is that this is less expensive. And that, you know, but to know that for sure, you could have an engineer who's currently working out at the transfer station to do a first phase feasibility study, come up with a cost of a townwide sewer to address the issue, and then compare. What we're seeing in other communities, where I'm working in Barnstable, as one example, that these INA systems typically are less expensive on a per lot basis than a centralized sewer collection and treatment system. That isn't necessarily true for Wellfleet. It is town specific, but that's generally been the case in the projects we've looked at. So, and I hear what I think Hillary's suggestion is a good one. At the same time, in terms of paying twice, as I suggested, part of the cost efficiency of tying this to existing upgrades is that this project we just saw a few minutes ago is going to spend some money to put in the system. A significant part of the money is excavating the site, doing the site work, the engineering, etc. And that's going to happen whether an IA goes in there or just the upgraded Title V. The difference really is the treatment system, which is around the $10,000 number, and which is why we were suggesting as one option the town providing that as an economic incentive. So, you know, the other thing I'll mention is the town of Chatham dealt with this issue too when they built their sewer. They said, what about people who have just put in INAs? And what they did is they wrote a regulation that gave those people a grace period. And I don't know the number of years, but it was significant. So in fact, they're not hitting them twice.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Yeah. I mean, I am all for this regulation. I think this is an excellent regulation, and I'm ready to, as a Board of Health member, to support it, you know, 150%. I just need to feel from, or need to know that there's an all-inclusive plan to allow us to perhaps change what's happening in the town of Wellfleet, perhaps change what's happening in the Duck Creek area eventually, as far as business and growth, etc. And that we're not looking for a short-term goal and sacrificing a long-term goal. So that's what I'm saying. I think my personal feeling is the regulation is great. But in reality, it's got to be put into practice and meet a long-term goal as well as a short-term goal.
Hillary, you're muted.
Yep, I was just going to say, we have two questions, one from Ryan Curley and one from Helen Miranda Wilson. So,
yes, I have some comments. So the different sub-embayments of the town have different thresholds that need to be met. It's not just a harbor-wide threshold. You know, we keep talking about Duck Creek, which is, yeah, that one's a really difficult one to solve. But some of these other watersheds or sub-embayments are easier to solve. And in particular, with the MEP, the Herring River basically does not require almost any additional nitrogen remediation. So one of the concerns with something like this is that you're also burdening residents within the Wellfleet Harbor watershed who are in areas that do not need to pay additional money to provide additional treatment of the wastewater. The other issue, I mean, one of the things I would say in terms of adopting a regulation is that in an instance where an IA upgrade would be required by the Board of Health under current circumstances, even in the absence of a completed 208 plan, I would encourage the adoption of these regulations to apply in those instances. I've talked to Brian Baumgartel of the the Septic Alternative Testing Center, and he said that some of the older generation systems, in his opinion, should be sunsetted, and so we really should be prioritizing what type of performance we want the systems that are being installed to perform at for IAs, you know, to meet a variance that would be issued by the Board of Health currently. And then lastly is that with the engineering study of the 95 Lawrence Road project, with the associated collection scenarios and collection areas for essentially what would be a cluster septic system or septic treatment system. So small scale, small scale relatively. It's but the flow volumes are still pretty high. For their upper limit of that study was 35,000 gallons per day. But when the math was done by Scott, it came out with, and he's done the math on what it would cost per kilogram for the removal rate, or for the removal provided by the septic system upgrades, and the cost for, in that instance, at Lawrence Road. And the cost for the Lawrence Road project is way cheaper than the septic upgrades would be. So within areas where there are high volume users with sufficient density, it would make a lot of sense to do cluster systems if those numbers are even within the ballpark. You're talking about a price that's half or less than half of what the price per kilogram of nitrogen removal provided by these systems would be. Obviously, there's only a limited number of areas within the town where that might be appropriate. So, you know, as I said, high density areas are areas where there's, you know, high volume users plus high density. So basically the center of town, central district area is where they would make the most sense. And then, so what I would encourage is, you know, what Janet's driving at is, you know, what happens if we have this regulation and we say, all right, you know, you're required to install this new IA system within this sub-embayment, and then we turn around 2 or 3 years later and we say we're going to build a cluster system here instead, to address the needs of all of these properties rather than just the need of your specific property. There are definitely a number of sub-embayments where this should go into effect essentially immediately. We'll never be able to sewer them at a cost-effective basis. My concern here is that it's not a targeted regulation currently. We're treating the harbor as a whole, when the MEP treats the harbor as a whole, but also with the subattendant parts. And we need to be aware of that and to take into considerations how, you know, what would be the most appropriate solutions within the different sub-embayments. We don't, you know, we want to take a very, I mean, to borrow the phrase, a targeted watershed approach. And I think that's something that we really need to keep in mind. So that's all I'll say. So thank you.
I just wanted just to do a little addition to what Ryan had to say. Again, I'm all for this regulation. I think, you know, as we see as many upgrades that we approve, et cetera, IA is the way to go, and doing it today, Hillary, you're absolutely right. It's the right thing to do. But I did a site visit there this morning, and in doing the site visit, I looked at where we were. I looked at the potential of Main Street. I looked at the Goldman's property. I looked at the historical, you know, I mean, it's just a very, very, very dense area. It's probably the densest area. The houses are almost on top of each other there. We know that from the number of variances we've had to have for any replacements up till now. So when I look at, as you said, Ryan, for the potential for a cluster, that's crying out to us. I mean, that top of Main Street is just crying out to us. So and that's what, and not that I'm not for this regulation, I am, but I just want to see a solid, individualized plan for the whole watershed, just as Ryan's saying. I think that might appease some of what I'm feeling. So, you know, so you can say to these people, okay, you have to put in an IA in order to sell your house. but you need to do that or whatever. But keep in mind that you may be really leaning yourself to a cluster situation, so I don't know.
Can we hear from Helen, who also has her hand up?
Oh,
Yes, a few things to supplement something Scott said and something Hillary said, and some of you know this. Janet, to answer your question, under the 208 plan, the DEP mandates that all municipalities have a Plan B, which consists of sewering an awful lot
I know
of the
that, yes.
town.
Yes.
So, okay, good. Because
I know.
you asked the question and then Scott can add that. Thank you.
I just.
The other
wanted to
thing
know
is-
if in fact we had highlighted any areas that we say from the wastewater committee, these are our potential cluster sewers.
Okay, so the second thing is Hillary mentioned freshwater, but as far as I know, mitigating the wastewater going into the watershed there around freshwater, and we've got a lot of it, is also necessary under the 208 plan. Now, I go to what are called GUAPACA meetings, which are the people from South Truro and North Wellfleet who are around the ponds. And they're all very, very into doing things about their water. So although there aren't a lot of places that might benefit from a cluster system, there are some that might. There's some density around a few of the ponds, but that would be an area where, given that one has to address that for the 208 plan, an IAs with support, from the town financially in one way or another would be good. So I question not having in this proposed regulation number 608, only mentioning the harbor embayment system, unless there's something technical, Scott, that I don't know, that you're including the ponds in that term.
Helen, the ponds are part of the harbor embayment. All
Okay,
the
thank
water
you.
flows from the ponds go into the harbor embayment.
Okay, thank you. It's unclear with the language. Now, the last thing I want to say is, we have a complicated article about water right now. Proposal to run pipe on Briar Lane, up Route 6 to Briar Lane, or down Route 6 to Briar Lane, and hook up all those houses, all those lots, if they want municipal water. What is much more needed there, and which will have to be addressed for the 208 plan, is what goes into the Upper Pole Dyke Marsh. And I would think that would be a prime area, starting with Moby Dick, including Outer Cape Health, including the Flying Fish and the Box Lunch, big users. Outer Cape, not so much. And all those houses along there, and perhaps, depending on the square footage necessary, having a treatment system on the large island of land, which the DOT would probably give us permission to use. They do that in Provincetown. And frankly, to spend the money to treat it back to drinking water. I think it would be worth it. And it would give us credit, Scott, no? And it also, you have to know, there's a 21-year fetch on water versus treating wastewater. And again, people have asked, why are we not dealing with the wastewater first? The last thing about IAs that's excellent is that they return the water pretty much to where it was taken from, which is a very good idea. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I just have a couple. I think one of the things that is always a challenge, and Hillary, Scott, and I have had a number of conversations about this, and along with other people in town, I don't think there's any perfect solution. No matter whether it's well, just to put sewer on the table. I mean, back to your original comment, Janet, about the density in the downtown area, that's the area that we would ideally sewer first. It is the most dense. The work that EPG did looking at ballparking what a sewer system would cost, really focused on, including that downtown district. And, the cost per kilogram because of the sewage treatment facility, you're getting up into the $800 to $1,000 a kilogram to remove that nitrogen, to hook those people up and pump it all the way down to the transfer station and treat it. So the advantage for the IA system is that you're at somewhere between maybe 300 and 500, so it's almost a third to half the cost to implement solution now that has an immediate impact. The other thing I would mention with regard to clustering, we're with the 95 Lawrence Road project, we've got some real numbers now around a particular location that, real hard drives out soft. So rather than theoretical, here's a real example with real engineering data and a real number of residents, et cetera, et cetera. We also have because that's got the opportunity to hook in the elementary school and some other things, it's unique. I don't think the wastewater committee is looking at taking clusters off the table anywhere. But I think it's also going to be, an opportunistic thing of what can you do at some point with several years planning, whether that's 3, 4, 5, 6, to do clusters or to do other alternatives. In the meantime, we'll have roughly 60 systems a year that are coming before the Board of Health that we could do something about. And even if it's not in the targeted watershed, in reference to Ryan's comment, we still get credit for it. We still get nitrogen credit for that installation. We'd obviously like them to be in the right watersheds, but my concern would be that we, want to be careful about letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. I mean, it takes a long time to plan and develop a cluster. It takes a long time to plan and develop a central collection system. There's something we can do now that does have an immediate impact at half the cost to a third the cost of a central collection system. And to me, that's just, that's the low-hanging fruit. That's easy. It's right there for the taking, and it is inexpensive. It's relatively low cost. So the Conservation Law Foundation sued the Cape because of its slow pace in doing anything about implementation. They're making noises, lately that things are moving too slowly. I think with regard to DEP and where the town of Wellfleet sits, to the extent that we're proactive, to the extent that this regulation gets adopted, it's concrete evidence that the town is taking action. So it's very important from that standpoint. The optics are as important as the regulation. And that does, again, that's not to say that we're not going to look at clusters and other options in other areas of town. But anyway, that's just kind of my observation, is that where we can do something now is better than kicking the can down the road another 3 to 6 years.
Can I just,
Yeah, Jack,
one last bit? So Scott, so the Board of Health has the numbers. What's the estimated cost per kilogram of nitrogen being removed by the cluster system or the potential for the cluster system at 95 Lawrence Road?
I think there were 3 different, as you know, Ryan, there were 3 different sizes there, 3 different flows. I think 10,000, essentially 10,000 gallons per day, 25 and 35,000 gallons per day. Because you have what I'll call an anchor project, the housing project there, which provides the base for this cluster and the cost efficiency. When you get up to the higher flow with the neighborhood, I think it gets down to around $150 or $200 a kilogram, according to the Bowler report, the calculations that I saw in that report. And I think Kurt's numbers are pretty good on the INAs on an individual basis, probably $300 or $400 a kilogram for an on-site system. And that's based primarily on this, well, based on a lot of places, but including this recent Buzzards Bay report I mentioned earlier. So does that answer your question, Ryan?
Yes, it's just for their benefit.
But I would urge that, I think everybody understands, this is not a discussion of the INA versus the 905 Lawrence. They're not, there's no trade there. In fact, I would argue you need both. And if you don't, if the town doesn't do things like this, then I really do think the central sewer is the likely place you're going to end up. And my guess is, my professional guess is going to be more expensive. There are other advantages and disadvantages. One that Helen mentioned, you're moving water from one watershed to another, which is something to think about, a lot of water. But so there's pros and cons, but in terms of cost effectiveness, which is one of my goals in preparing this plan, I'm trying to find the lowest cost way for the town to solve this problem. And I would echo what Kurt said. DEP on many occasions have said, we just want to see the town taking actions, moving in the right direction. We don't expect them to solve the problem overnight. So the idea of this regulation would be not to go out and knock on everybody's door and say, you have to replace your system this year, but rather when they come in, when they're going to be digging up their property anyways and spending that $5,000 or $10,000 in excavation, let's put the tank in. That's the idea, which would make it more cost effective long term. And we did do some calculations I didn't mention using Hillary's figures of, again, I think it was 30, 40, 50 systems per year. If you run that out 20 years, which is essentially the minimum time frame for these plans, that really gets to the number of systems that we'd need to upgrade to solve these issues. So that's one advantage of this approach, is you're not doing everything at once, where you may, like with the sewer project, you're doing it on a as needed basis when people are going to be excavating their properties anyways. So
just for my last 2 cents, I mean, we all know, I mean, we have an idea of where potential cluster developments or cluster wastewater treatment might be applicable. The vast majority of the geographic area of the town, it's not, cluster systems are not applicable because you don't have the density to produce the volume of flow to get the cost down below what these INA systems would produce. But again, the concern is if we go down this road, exclusive, well, it wouldn't be initially exclusively, I should say, without exploring and designating where cluster wastewater treatment might be the preferred solution to an area, then we're going to have a much harder time selling it to the town if we come back for funding at a later date. We know it's just a couple of watersheds that clusters might be applicable to, and what I would encourage is to carve out the areas that we know it's not, where clusters are going to not be relevant whatsoever, and then this is a perfectly good regulation, and then as we get more information as to the feasibility of clusters within these other limited areas of town, and is to revisit it in those areas on a more, a very more selective approach to those areas as to how we're going to be going about treating it. I'd also like to say that the Duck Creek watershed, and I think some of the Cove, which is the other problematic areas, they're the two biggest problems. So Duck Creek for the MEP ends at the railroad causeway. Everywhere beyond the railroad causeway to the breakwater is basically the Cove. is that, well, in terms of the center of town, the dividing line between the Duck Creek watershed and the Herring River watershed, where the MEP basically concludes that we do not really need treatment, even though we should be, encouraging nitrogen reduction there, is only a few hundred feet. It's literally one side. The front lawn of the town hall is in the Duck Creek watershed, and the back half of the parking lot at town hall is in the Herring River watershed. It's a very fine line, but in terms of, that is another reason why, specific to the central area of the town, why a cluster system might make sense, because we could relocate any of the nitrogen load within, a certain area of the Duck Creek watershed into the Herring River watershed without having to pipe it all the way to the transfer station to do so. So, thank you.
Yeah, just one comment on clusters, because we're not, I think one of the challenges that we've had, and certainly Scott can speak to this and Hillary as well, but one of the challenges that we've had relative to thinking about clusters is you still need a laydown area, you still need adequate infiltration. You change the parameters a bit, but you still have a lot of land that you need in order to have wastewater treatment for a cluster system. The advantage, as Scott pointed out at 95 Lawrence Road, is you got a huge piece of land, the anchor location where this makes a lot of sense. So we actually have a beautiful opportunity, but I want to be careful about trying to map that experience widely throughout town, because many of the areas of town that we'd love to do a cluster system, there's no laydown land to be able to put the facilities and the equipment.
That's not quite exactly what the conclusion of the 95 Lawrence Road project is. Some of the sites are underneath parking surfaces. So they do have site locations for the leaching fields underneath some of the parking areas on the 95 Lawrence Road. So it's not, you don't have to necessarily convert virgin land.
No, and I'm not, Ryan, I'm not, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying basically you've got to have adequate locations, and they get very site specific. The beautiful thing about this Board of Health regulation or proposed regulation is that it's something that we know we can do, as opposed to something theoretical. And Scott, you wanted to tag on?
Yeah, I guess I just want to, before we wrap this up, a lot of good comments and suggestions. And one thing I'd like to offer is the discussion. I think Ryan started it. He's right. The Herring River watershed needs less treatment under existing development, none at all. Under future build out, maybe some, but perhaps the Herring River Restoration Project will take care of that. So I think the point is this could be more targeted, and if with the chair's support or other people interested, I could come back with a more targeted option to show you that I think might reflect some of the comments made today. Where, I mean, I think Ryan's right. There are some areas that, frankly, I have a really hard time envisioning sewer ever because of the density and distance away and the cost. I'll tell you, the largest driver on cost of sewer systems is density and distance, because the collection system is usually more expensive than the treatment system. So there clearly are areas that really don't make any sense to sewer and bring to a centralized facility, I don't think. In those areas that do require nitrogen, maybe this is a more appropriate solution that the town can get behind sooner rather than later. In other watersheds that you think you might want a sewer or cluster, then maybe you hold off in those areas. So if that's something that the board's interested in, I would be happy to come back with a more targeted approach.
I'm just going to make one last comment. I think it's evident from our different sources of information, and this has been great. I mean, I feel like a lot of information that I didn't know has been shared in that, but I think the prevailing feeling I have as Janet Q citizen is we need transparency in this, and we need to show that we have definitely thought about every alternative, not just to get credit, but to have good wastewater capability. I think the more we continue to say we're doing this so we can meet the plan, the more we're going to get distrust. And I think we need transparency. I think we need to be candid, and we have to show scientific data that we are investigating where we can effectively, where we project we may need to cluster. And I think it might be bad news, but I think the transparency is the thing that is lacking in our public meetings to date. I mean, unless there's been more that I haven't been to, I feel that that is a prevailing thing. So I think we need to really do a nice scientific basis of transparency for the public. If we're going to look for any support in this and any future that is going to require changes in the downtown area, which affects everybody.
Yeah.
So all your short-term rentals without a downtown area, you don't have it. Yeah. So I'm
Janet,
sorry.
may I speak?
Ken is here, but Helen, yeah, sorry. Helen?
Yeah, so, yes, Janet, thank you. What you said, yes. Whether or not 208 plans exists, we need to deal with it. But what I wanted to say is this, through you to Scott. So the first time I sat through one of your presentations about the advantages of more users on the Lawrence Road system, septic waste system. The first thing I thought about was pulling the lots that are on School Street, which is very dense, from East Main Street across Route 6 and up the hill, bringing with it, you know, the pipe going past the two departments and bringing it up to the Lawrence Road septic system site, because that amount of density would give you a lot of nitrogen mitigation. It's up the hill from Duck Creek, and they really need it. And that would, you know, be a better place than what's happening down on the north side of that hill, right? Where those properties are, you know, they were put in there later and there's more separation and their septic systems are more up to snuff, to put it, you know, very scientifically. So thank you for letting me say that, Janet. Last night at the select board meeting, Kurt said something particularly compelling and useful, which is the more people you have on a system, if I understood this correctly, which I did, I think, the more people you have on a system, the less you pay per nitrogen kilogram. Okay, thank you.
Ken, I see Ken is here. Does Ken want to take over? You want me to finish up, Ken? I'll finish up. Okay. Are there any other comments, or what's our next step, Hillary? Do we look at this regulation and take a vote, or what's our next step? You're muted, love.
Yeah, yes. I don't think we need to take a vote today.
Okay,
I think we
okay.
can think it over. I think we can refine it a bit with the different watersheds. But I think we should think about it and discuss it again at our next meeting and
Okay.
give it
Can I
some
say something?
good thought.
Janet.
Hillary?
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with what Hillary is saying, and I think it's important that we listen to that, because we're never going to get citizens on board if we're going to be subjecting them to a double jeopardy. I think it really tying this in with the plan, as she suggested, I think is the most prudent way to go. That's my 2 cents.
I guess just to add one more bit, I mean, we can come up
Hillary,
with a package a package of regulations, because I don't know how long we've been talking about cesspools for, but I think maybe we want to roll all of these things into one regulation package. I know the wastewater committee, myself, Scott, our other consultants are meeting with DEP at the end of the month. So it might be nice to sort of give them a preview of some of these things and get their take before we, jump into anything. I know we like the IA, we think they do good, but it would be good to sort of package everything and look at it holistically.
Hillary, could I make a comment about this? Because I think we should approve these so they're at our availability to use at our discretion. I mean, if we keep putting this off, I mean, this may have even come in handy today. We don't know how we would have voted. I think if the AI system, and my recollection of the meeting we had with Dee and Scott's conclusion at that meeting was that AI systems will make a big difference in cleaning up the harbor. And I think we need, these nitro and nitrex systems take us to a whole new level.
Yeah.
And I think we should have the availability. We don't have to use at our discretion. If we think this is appropriate, we're in a high volume area, well, then we should have that available, because I think we keep putting it off. We're not going to meet for another month. And I think we should have this. So I would vote for it now and not put it off. And we have our discretion when we need to apply it.
Well, we can't vote for it today because we don't have an advertised public hearing on it. Today, we were just having
Okay. Oh, okay.
But I think along with this, we should probably also take a look at the regulation that Scott spoke about from Chatham that gives folks, a time period to hook up to a sewer if and when it comes by.
Right. I think that would be a very good piece of transparency.
Yeah, I think we need both to move forward.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else on the agenda that we would like to discuss?
I wonder, Scott, would it be possible to see if the Nitrex folks could come and give a little presentation at our next meeting? And I don't know if George is still, actually, have most of you heard George's layer cake presentation, right? He gave it a while
Yes.
ago.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so we've heard from George. Maybe we want to hear from Nitrex about what his technology offers, just because it would probably be interesting to us.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think John Smith would be very interested in doing that. Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you heard him speak at an event in Hyannis that I did let the wastewater committee know about. He does go out and do a little dog and pony show on this, and he's an interesting guy. He's I won't get into it, but he's done some interesting things, and George Hoyfelder, for one, I think is quite supportive of what he's doing. So I think I can get John to come to the
Scott,
meeting.
Scott, do you know, is the retrofitting an easy process? Retrofitting a standard system?
It's a good question, and honestly, the answer, from my experience, the answer is it's a lot by lot decision, which kind of goes to whoever made the comment about maybe you having some flexibility when you apply this, because what it comes down to is think of it this: it's either a 1,200 or a 1,500 or a 2,000 gallon concrete, looks like a septic tank.
Right.
So if there's a place. If there's a place to put that on the lot, in fact, I was looking at the last site plan thinking, where would I put it?
Well, I was just thinking that because our lots are so tiny sometimes.
Right,
I don't know if they'd be
exactly.
available for
Exactly.
this. I mean,
But
I was just wondering.
But the footprint of a 1,500 to 2,000 gallon tank, if you looked at that last site plan, that was minor compared to the leach field.
Right.
So oftentimes, even though the lots are tight, there is a place to put this. But to answer your question, in some cases, it's almost a no-brainer. There's a obvious place to put it. Doesn't disrupt anything. And in that case, it's really just the cost of the tank. In other places, it might require moving something, which adds, as you know, more expense.
Right.
So it is a site-by-site consideration.
Analysis, exactly right. All right.
Scott, do you have a contact at Nitro as well?
You mean Nitrex?
I thought we had the Nitrex system and one other.
Nitro is John Smith and
Okay.
Nitrex is Pio Lombardo. Yeah, I
Oh.
know both. I know both of them.
Do you think we could get them both to our next meeting maybe and hear from both of them in one shot, just so we can understand the technology better, or is it best to separate them out?
We could certainly do that, although I think, honestly, there may be a little competition there.
Let's
Okay,
do one.
Uh,
Yeah.
my guess is, and there's some personalities there that I won't get into.
yeah,
I
yeah,
like both of them a lot. I consider, I know Pio for a longer time, but John Smith. So I'll just bite my tongue and say I think it'd be better to do it separately.
Let's do
Okay,
them one at a time. That's a good idea.
okay.
But I
Could we
can
do
certainly.
them at like different hours on the same day, or? Well, we could talk about that, sorry.
Yeah, why don't you and I talk about it?
Yeah.
I've been talking with John Smith about what's going on in Wellfleet. He's been
Yeah.
very helpful in providing case studies. He has quite a few more systems in the ground on the Cape. I think PO only has 2, Nitrix. Where
Okay,
there's, I think, 18 systems in the ground now for Nitro.
Nitro, okay,
But why don't you and I talk about that, Hillary?
sure, that's fine. Would the wastewater be interested in hearing that as well, so we could do it as sort of a joint?
Sure. Sure.
That's all I got, Janet.
Okay, anything else? Any other comments or,
Thank you for considering.
okay,
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, I know it's complicated.
it is. Thank you guys for coming, really. It was
Okay.
good.
Have a
Great.
good.
Okay, just need to go over the minutes and get our next meeting, if you'd like to do that. Any corrections or additions to the minutes of July 8th? There's just one typo on the COVID update on July 8th.
Do you want to hold on to the minutes, Janet, until Rebecca's back? Because
Sure, sure.
I mean, I don't want to mistranslate the corrections. And she'll
Okay,
be
great,
back at our
great.
next meeting.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah, I just think that might be better.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Any comments from the public or anyone else who's on our Zoom adventure? Does Parker have anything to add?
I have
Let's
Mattson.
see. We should ask her.
They're good.
She's good. She's good.
I'm out of here. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Let's take the charge. If you want plugged in, it just keeps going down.
Okay, is that it?
A motion to adjourn?
Am I still here? Yep, okay.
Yes. I'm sorry, Nick, did you want to say something, dear?
No, I'm okay. I'm good.
Okay,
Are we voting or anything?
Yep, you
Anything
need
to
a
vote
motion
on?
to adjourn.
to adjourn.
Yep.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So
I'll
moved.
make a motion.
Okay. Oh, there he is. Now you come and make a motion.
I was leave it alone. You were doing wonderful.
Oh,
today,
thank you,
Ken. I was
Ken.
glad
Thank you,
to know.
dear. Thank you, dear.
But
Thanks,
like I said,
guys.
I made the motion. Who's gonna second it?
Okay, who's going to second it?
Me.
I'll
Nick.
second.
Okay, Gary.
Everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Hillary, so much.
Thanks.
Hillary, for all the work you do.
Thank you.